Thank you very much. I realized that this book just came out that I wrote. It's the 70th book. So you might say, he can't be saying anything new. But the fact is, I realized after so many years of research and work that what I'm really interested in is the common good. And that means the man I respect greatly, besides Peter Drucker, is Jeremy Bentham, who was a jurist, a philosopher in England, and a social reformer who formulated the idea of the common good. Namely, when a business is making a decision, or when the government is considering a policy, or a nonprofit is trying to make a decision, ask, is it good for the greatest number of people? Not is it just good for me, but let's try to make more decisions that are advancing the common good. Now, Peter would appreciate that so much. Peter and I met in a strange way. I get a phone call, and the voice is a German accented voice, and it's Pete. I said, are you possibly Peter? You sound like Peter Drucker. And he says, yes, Dr. Kotler, we haven't met, but could you come to California? Because I'm doing some work on nonprofit organizations, and you're the expert on marketing for nonprofit organizations. And so we got to talk, and he says, Peter, he says, am interested in museums, churches, orchestras, and I think they're business entities. That is, we should look at them as organized and how they're managed. And he said that he believed that these nonprofits are not well managed, and they need to get into management thinking. So it was a marvelous experience. But the reason I'm also bringing up Peter is that he is the grandfather of marketing. I mean, the reason for that is you have to see some of the statements that he made over time. Look at how perceptive he was. The business enterprise has two and only two basic functions. What are they? Marketing and innovation. All the rest are costs. By the way, he made a lot of enemies. That said, the finance guy is a cost, the production people are costs, but now he made another point that is not apparent from that. If you're only good at one of those two basic functions, it's not going to work. If you're only good at marketing, but you have nothing to innovate, you won't succeed. And if you're just able to innovate, but there's nothing to market, you don't know how to market it after you innovated it, it's not good. So I look for both of those things to make up a great company. By the way, I'm working now with a very interesting company that died and is so much more alive today than it was when it was a great company in its previous life. That's Fujifilm. Fujifilm, we all stopped buying their film, right? Or any film. And Mr. Komedi, the president, he said to his 75,000 staff, you could leave now because film is dying, or you can stay with me and be part of a bigger company. And what he was saying is that his company has so many technologies that can go into medicine, that can go into actually aging creams for women and men, and so on and so forth, that it will be a bigger company. So we're writing now a whole book about the Phoenix effect. You know, Phoenix is about when a company dies but comes alive again. And here's what they call their company. Fujifilm is now the never stop company. Never stop innovating. They're in so many new businesses out of that idea that they should not only have great marketing, but they should have great innovation. The purpose of a company is to create customers. He made us aware of that. The aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits him and sells then. itself. Now, I took that remark and I ended up wording it a little differently, that the aim of marketing is to make selling unnecessary. Boy, the salespeople didn't like that. And you know when it happens? When a new car comes, like the Tesla, and people stand in line to buy the first one. In other words, you make something that meets a need that nothing else ever met, that people really feel that's important, and so on. So the idea is you create a line and take their orders with no salesmen and no ads. And then Peter said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so many other things as well. So let's go to this field of marketing and realize that marketing is very different than just sales or selling. Selling goes back to Adam and Eve. Eve told Adam, eat the apple and we'll get a lot of knowledge. And we know what happened with the first sales. That was the first sales job biblically. But there was no marketing until the early 1900s when some books first appeared called marketing. Written, by the way, by economists who were rebelling against the fact that economic theory was making too much out of price theory. Like the only thing that influences how much you will sell is the price you set. And what we really should recognize is the whole demand curve can be lifted by advertising. It could be lifted by salespeople, by promotions. And so these early books called marketing were about much more of the real system in the world, not the figment of the economist's imagination. In other words, marketing was going to be about what really happens in markets, in marketplaces, buying and selling, exchanging, advertising, pricing, promotions, and so on. Now, marketing itself has been changing in its theme over the years. In the 1950s and 1970s, even before that, we were very product-oriented. We said, you want to know who my company is? We make cars. We make perfume. We make it for everyone. We want everyone to buy our kind of car or our Coca-Cola. We realized from work that Procter & Gamble and Unilever were doing that it's more important to know what customers want and what they're like than to just make a product short of that. So we got into customer orientation. It didn't stop there. In my first book, 1967, on marketing management, I only gave 3 pages to the idea of a brand. You know, and it's the old idea because it all started with people who own cows. They would brand their cows and so on. And maybe we could say that authors, their brand, like Charles Dickens, he was a brand, and any new book by him you want to read. But I didn't make much of it. But branding became not only big, but maybe people were saying, I'm not in marketing, but I do branding. And I think they're missing the point there, because they're talking, therefore, about a real something that's been made, and they want to make it a strong brand, but who decided to make that in the first place? Everything starts with the idea of creating and meeting a need, creating and delivering on a need. Now, all of that marketing that came out in my books, if you have a copy of one of my books, you can put it aside now. It's dead, because it doesn't mention digital. I remember a president of a company came up to me and he said, would you sign I have a copy of your book. So I looked at the copy, I said, that's hardly anyone knows, the first edition, 1967. And I hesitated. He says, why are you hesitating? I said, well, did you like the chapter on brand equity? He says, I don't remember reading about brand equity. And did you I threw a bunch of terms out because all of them came way after the first edition. And I said, and what did you think of the digital part of the book? And he says, he says, what are you up to? I said, I want you to buy a new book, but not for my sake, but for your sake, because it's in the digital world that marketing is moving, and you have to move in that direction. I also think marketing is going to take on a new direction and do much more with societal values and the common good orientation. Namely, we would say that we see this now in the talk about a company being asked to develop its purpose, to really decide, is it just money making or something more than that? What's your basic purpose as a company? What are your values? Do you hide your values from the public to whom you're selling your products, or do you want that your set of values to be part of what you're selling? So those questions are moving us in a new direction. This diagram I'll be very brief on, but one of the best books on helping you become more customer-driven and oriented. These are two Australian writers, father and son, Lyndon and Chris, and I think they put together the best book. And basically, the dimensions are the chapters of the book. And if you look at the black ring around the book, it starts really with consumer insight being the most important starting point. Do you have not consumer knowledge, not just a lot of data, but insight into the target market that you're working with and why it buys anything, why it might not buy anything. But consumer insight is half the job. Consumer foresight, because consumers are changing, the world's changing too. So look ahead at the future consumer and what he or she might want. But thirdly, the competitors. You have to define your competitors and have insight into the way they operate. And that's not enough. Fourthly, foresight into where they're moving and how they would respond to a move you might make. And then they mention a few more things. Peripheral vision. Don't just look at the target market and your distributors and suppliers and so on. Have your eyes seeing more of what's happening in adjacent markets and in the world as a whole. And then they have a chapter on collaboration and then strategic alignment. The reason for the colors in that diagram is they did this for a particular company, and their assessment was, as far as the level of consumer insight, it was only at 60%, which is pretty good, but they could do a better job of getting a deeper insight and so on. So any company can use this book of the chapters to figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are. Now, what are the major tenets of today's marketing as opposed to tomorrow's future marketing? And this is just a review for any of you who've been ever in marketing. You're going to be buyer needs centered, not just product centered. You're going to have the 4 Ps, product, price, place, and promotion, somewhere in your marketing planning and analysis. You've got to say something about what is going to happen to your product, your price on the product, where it will be made available, that's place, and what kind of promotion are you going to give that product to make it successful? Those are called the 4 Ps. There's a big debate about whether there's really only 4 Ps. Where's packaging? If you're a perfume company, the bottle itself is partly the thing that sells what's inside the bottle. Well, packaging is part of the product, or if packaging is so important to you, in your planning process, make it a separate category because you're doing some exciting things with the packaging. Where are the sales force people in the 4 Ps? Well, they were part of promotion. So everything could be collapsed to 4 Ps, but if you want to have a separate section on what you're going to do with the sales force or packaging, extend it. The third big idea in modern marketing is STP. Every market is complex. You've got to segment it along many dimensions to discover a group that your company can do a better job servicing. So you don't have to stay only serving one segment. For example, even McDonald's, which has a branding positioning for everyone, has separate branding positionings for senior citizens, how to get them into McDonald's, how to get teenagers to go to McDonald's instead to one of the competitors. So always you must have in your plan a target market that you are interested in reaching, and you know their characteristics and how they buy, and then you message to that group. And there is a process, and I summarize it very briefly. All marketing that's good starts with MR, namely marketing research. In other words, don't go blindly. Don't make a perfect product in your mind. It's perfect in my mind, and then expect it's going to sell. Start with researching the market that might want to buy that product in order to get leads and prospects. Then, and part of that is the research will lead to segmentation and targeting, and positioning is the step of having something. How does this offer you have differ from others? How have you positioned your product? And then that leads to TM, and that's target market. You must define your target market, and you must be able to present a VP, a value proposition, to the target market. Actually, positioning is really about a promise that you're going to do something for that people in that target market through your product and service. And then MP is finally your marketing plan. Everything you've done up to now is embodied in a marketing plan for the next year or 2 years or 5 years. But to be sure it's going to work, you got to implement the plan. And to know that the implementation worked, you've got to do C, which is control. You have to get feedback. And here's the problem. If your new product is not winning in the market, the best way to figure out why is to go backwards. Was the implementation bad? The plan was great, but the implementation was bad. No, the implementation was good. Was it possibly that you had a very poor mix of things in the marketing plan? You gave too much attention to the sales force and not enough to the digital. If that wasn't the problem, maybe you had the wrong value proposition. Maybe it was even worse. You went after a target market that is not available to you. Or you didn't, all these things can be analyzed by the I and the C, the implementation going to the control, and then reiterating your marketing plan. And all these things that we were doing from the 60s on included target marketing with one big tool called the 30-second commercial, and all the print advertising too. So that's the way or state of marketing when I wrote my 1967 book. What is real marketing? There's 3 definitions. Some people would say, I know marketing. Isn't that when you deal with a sales force, advertising, pricing, and promotion to increase the sales? Yeah, that's true. It's a set of tools. A new view. Marketing is, to put it succinctly, CCDV to a TM. Creating, communicating, and delivering superior value, a promise of superior value, to a target market. There's a third possible level, and that's when you say, you know what marketing is? It's the business discipline that is responsible for responsibly growing the company's business. Now, you may say, no, technology grows the company's business, and I agree with you. But the marketing force is what you're using to know so much about the market and the customers that you can see new opportunities. The real wonderful thing about a chief marketing officer is his ability, through his people, to recognize trends and new opportunities that will grow the company further. Now, I'm going to stop more or less with this, this is going to give you, if you are in the area of marketing, some sense of what's going on in the new marketing. A lot of AI, advertising, a lot of artificial intelligence, which I'll summarize. There's a lot of social media that is coming in. We are often trying to reach customers through and learn about them through Facebook and Google and Instagram and so on. We're building a lot of algorithms, and an algorithm is a fancy word for just a step-by-step process. So when you go to a bank to get a loan for $5,000, it used to be decided by the banker, and he would ask you some questions. Now he doesn't even have to do that. He has enough data on you that the answer will come out of his algorithm, that anyone who wants $5,000 with that and has that income and that history and that age and that, the machine will grind out a yes or no for a $5,000. Or it may even be better. It may do it as a predictive analytical exercise. What is the probability that the customer coming into that bank will repay the $5,000 loan? And if the probability is 10%, you don't want to make the loan. If it's 50%, you're taking some risk. If it's 90%, given the characteristics of the borrower, you'll make the loan. So algorithms are used everywhere. Should we release a person from prison at this point? He's been there 5 years. There's an algorithm. How should we let that student applying for Northwestern University to be accepted? It's an algorithm. We're leaving less to the admissions officer or other people involved and more to an algorithm. And many of the algorithms facilitate marketing automation. It reduces the labor intensity that might have been required to accomplish things. I would use marketing automation when you're doing an email campaign, especially if it's one where you have different emails that will be sent to different people depending on their characteristics, and you even want the arrival time of that email to be specified for that person. So imagine a huge map, matrix, and it says that for person X, that email message Y, not the Z one, but the Y message, should arrive always in the morning by 10 o'clock in their computer. So that's, and you don't want to do the handwork of setting that up. Marketing automation does the handwork of setting up all the emails that will go out. A concept that's exciting us a lot now is customer journey mapping. How does a person end up buying a car? Every company that makes a car wants to know, how did it happen that you ended up buying a Hyundai or whatever you bought? And there's no one way. There are probably maybe for cars 5 prototypical ways in which the car was bought. In one case, a woman saw an ad for Hyundai, and that's all that happened, nothing else. She saw a display later on. Later on, she was at past the dealership. She just saw it's a Hyundai dealership. Didn't do anything about it. Later on, she gets more interested, and she goes in and buys the car. So that can be described. That was her journey. Compared to another journey where someone just had a friend who said, my Hyundai is the best car. Yeah, that's interesting that you told me that, because I want to buy a new car. I'll go and take a look. He goes, takes a look, buys the car. So that's a different journey. Now, the thing that makes up a journey is what we call touch points. Having seen an ad, having met a salesman in a dealership. So the job of a company is not only to identify the different journeys, but to be good at the touch points, so that your dealer, who can lose the sale for you if he's a bad dealer, or make the sale. So you want to know what main journeys are and the main touch points and being present so that it facilitates the movement toward purchase. Another thing happening in modern marketing is the development of personas. Because I mentioned a woman who might buy a Hyundai, but there may be 5 types of women. Mary is different than Joanne or Jeannie. So we give names. We create names for persona of different people to give the advertising people some real sense that they're talking to a Mary when they're developing the sales presentation. Because then that way the person will know a lot about Mary, her demographics, her interests, and the whole ecosystem she's involved in. That's, by the way, a way to use ecosystems. What is that person's ecosystem? What is touching her life? So basically, personas is happening. Now, content is a very strong word now in marketing. We always had content. We always had sales messages. But now we're spending a lot of time without sales messages, but messages. Messages to people, because we know a lot about the interests of people. What if we have a good customer of ours, hasn't bought recently, we know he loves sports, and particularly he loves basketball. And we just read ourselves a great story on a hero in basketball, which he may not have seen. It just comes in his email. I thought of you when I read this article, says the message. So we're now developing content that would not carry a sales pitch, but would warm up the relationship between you and different customers you have. And that's called content management and so on. Very new, it has a history, but a new thing is influencer marketing. And it started this way. Some people are so well known that they have maybe 1 million followers. It would be a great singer or athlete. They have so many followers. And the idea comes across that if that person with so many followers would mention your product subtly or just say, I think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, you would be very important to get him to even put a post that mentions your product. So this idea of influencer marketing started with, it really started with an earlier idea, word of mouth marketing. WMS, word of mouth, marketing, started with the idea that we are influenced very much by friends telling us about something they like, either on Facebook or personally. And then influencer marketing started with trying to identify people with big influence and to see if they would mention our product. You have to think of yourself now. Have you seen some fan? Who are you a fan of? And have you, in a sense, been moved to buy a product because the person you admired mentioned it? But now it's moved down to what is called micro influencers. Find people who have 15,000 followers, not 1 million, 15,000. Locally, find some of the people who have 15,000 and then see if they could post something favorable to you. And now it's gone further. It's now down to nano influencers. They have 5,000 people who follow them. And so one company told me they're so much into influencer marketing that their 80% of their budget is to pay money to those influencers. So you may be influenced by a lot of people who are earning money posting to you something. Omnichannel marketing, it's a fancy word for it. We're developing more and more channels of distribution. Who ever thought that you would buy food at a gas station? Ice cream, milk, whatever. So that's another channel. And the real problem with omnichannel marketing is to make sure that your branding and messaging is consistent in different channels. What would happen if your price was different in each channel? It will kill you because anyone will spot that you're charging less for Coca-Cola in this other channel, and there'd be a collapse. Everyone would go to the other channel. Lean marketing is the idea that if you're going to invent a new product, says Eric Ries, do not make the perfect product when you start out. Don't worry about the perfect product, because put out that imperfect product quickly and get feedback. And do it when you put out that imperfect product. Also have an imperfect marketing plan for how to announce it. Because both of those, the product and the imperfect plan, marketing plan, you'll learn so much from, you'll reiterate, you'll go back and make it better. And Eric Ries is for very lean marketing if you're in the innovation process. Start with lean marketing and learn quickly. And the final one is called cause marketing, which I've been advising every company to try to contribute to the common good, because the government seems to be stalemated. Government is not taking care of our problems. At least my government is not taking care of so many problems. That's why in our presidential election we're coming up with solutions, the wealth tax, a tax on stock transactions, all kinds of things, but businesses ought to be taking some cause. Could it be environment? Could it be the water shortage? Can business make a contribution? So let me stop here, because I'm told that you may have questions about marketing or any area like that. And let's turn to the first question that might be asked by someone here about marketing. Raise your hands, by the way, if you are in a position of marketing something. Oh, okay.
Excellent.
Okay, good. By the way, everyone here is a marketer. You could deny it, but you are. Even if you were courting someone as a date, or you're trying to get a job, you're going to make the best impression you can. You're marketing some aspect of yourself. But I know that some of you are doing the commercial marketing part. Okay, question? Yes, sir.
Yesterday I read again Marketing 4.0, and I liked the digital part in it, the 4P moving to the 4C. But what I even liked more was the chapter 3, and we are talking about power of ecosystems. How will this change the structure or the logic of marketing? You talked in this chapter 3 about the anthropology of marketing. I think it will have a very fundamental impact, this more than social. And the other thing is content perhaps only the first step of a more, what I would call, cognitive collaborative process of marketing. Yeah. So digital and technology will always look at technology, and I think 4P to 4C is the right move. But beyond, following this ecosystem and following this content cognitive path, what is your vision of marketing 5.0?
Okay, very good. This gentleman came up to me with my book called Marketing 4.0, terribly marked up. It's his third reading of the same book. And I said, congratulations. He says he learns every time he opens the book. Let me go to something you raised a question of. Naturally, I have more to. Okay. In that 4.0 book, I distinguished the 5 A's. You want to get some people to be aware of your product or service. Secondly, you want it to be an appealing feeling they have. Third, you should recognize that they're going to ask some questions about what they saw, and then you're going to hope that your answers are good enough to get them to act and buy, and then they should be so satisfied with what they bought from you that they will buy again. So if we use those, and by the way, there's no money made until the first act. Do you see a dollar sign? And then you make money when you have a repeat purchase. Now, the reason I bring that up is this is in the book 4.0. To get from creating awareness to having appeal, you use branding, you use marketing communications. So for that movement, from just being someone aware to find the product appealing, you use those. But then what are you going to use to get someone who finds the product appealing but asking some good questions? So underneath that, I have things you ask. And then if they ask, how do you answer in a way that they are satisfied and they act? And then finally, if they act, how do we turn them into an advocate? An advocate is a very strong term. It's like creating a fan. How do you make a customer into a fan who goes around and on the Facebook says, I had the best experience going to Disneyland or whatever is the experience. So the word advocate is really the essence. Now, some people say, I would like to start with making a person aware and to get them to be an advocate. Well, this is more analytical. There's more analytics involved. So that answers part of your question. The other thing you said is, now that you've been reading 4.0 a couple of times, what is 5.0? We have already decided. It's going to explore how new technologies are going to affect marketing. We call it Mark Tech and Ad Tech. There's a whole new biometrics is part of it. I have a colleague named Moran Cerf, who is one of the most sensational and impressive neuroscientists. We are now in P&G is testing a commercial by putting something on the head of volunteers to watch the commercial, and what P&G is watching is whether there's any blips while the commercial's going on. The worst kind of commercial is there's just a steady watching of it with no blips. And if a blip occurs, afterwards you say to the person, at this point when she uttered that, something went up. Do you know what happened? So you get certain insights that way. So 5.0 will deal with how new technologies can be used to advance marketing insight and so on. I know you had more, but let's see if there's any other questions. Yes, sir. Cause marketing, right.
There's probably quite a lot of cynicism from certain quarters around that, and there's greenwashing and there's
we worry about greenwashing being saying you're environmental, but you're not very serious about it.
Exactly. So my question is really, how do you tell the difference between the sort of the gold and the tinsel, and actually is there a difference?
I think that's a very good question, and maybe we're going to need a fact-finding group that will always report whether a cause is a serious one to a company or not. Just like whenever Trump speaks, we know it's 14,000 lies in a minute or something. I'm sorry if my politics differs from you, but I'm ashamed of that man running my country. And I met a Canadian, and I said, could you take over my country so we would be run well? Aside from that, we do know that companies flirt. See, companies were slow in going into this because of Milton Friedman. He was my professor at the University of Chicago, and he can convince you about anything in the world. And Milton said that a company should not get into causes. Just make money for the shareholders. And that is called neoliberal, neo-economics. It's dominated all of our thinking. But finally, you may have seen that the Business Roundtable met and 160 heads of major companies said they're leaving Milton Friedman and saying that a company should be rewarding all of its team members who are making it a successful company. That means the employees get paid better, suppliers, you choose better suppliers, distributors, and you care about the communities and what you're doing to communities when you close a factory and things like that. So we're in a new era where societal values are also coming in. So I think some companies, and I can name a dozen of them, are very serious about the cause they are connected with. Some have to be. For example, water. If water gets scarce in a lot of parts of the world, Coca-Cola can't exist in those parts of the world. So Coke is putting out, without blasting it to the world, they are doing their best work in water conservation. So I think your question was wonderful about how do we know if it's just puffery or serious stuff.
Professor Kotler, I just want to jump in. We have time for one more really fast question. So maybe this gentleman in the back. Let's see what you want to know.
Thank you very much, Philip, for this. Let me ask you about some basic assumptions that are changing. I mean, you have the overview of many years seeing this. You just mentioned one, and that was the basic economic view of it, sort of Milton Friedman and changing that, going to the common good perspective. Yes. The other one you mentioned that is changing is, you can say, the digital technologies helping us understand more and doing more stuff. Maybe there's another one, and if so, could you please mention some basic assumption that you feel we are in the midst of changing for marketing, and perhaps also outline very briefly how will the world look like if we now push the new world based on these changed assumptions?
Wow, thank you. There's two things I want to say about that. First of all, when it comes to digital, I do believe I've been pushing companies into getting into real digital work and social media work and cautioning them that they're going to overdo it. Don't stop your 30-second commercials. Here's what happens. P&G reached a point where they were putting in 35% of their budget in digital. And then a few years later, they said they're down to 20%. This is very good to know. And it wasn't a waste. The only way you know what works in digital is to try all of those tools and then retreat from the ones that aren't working. So don't be discouraged if you overdo digital work because you learned what works. Instagram works, and you find out maybe X doesn't work. In fact, they even say this, that what really builds the brand is the 30-second commercial, if it's a great one. A lot of us get into just promoting our product using discounts and promotions, and that is short-term thinking. You get your users to get habituated to bargains, and they don't, and it destroys the brand. So be very careful about how much work you put into big commercials versus digital. The second thing you ask, is there going to be the future? What's it going to look like? I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous about how much information is being collected about each of us. So we had a wonderful talk by the futurist just before that I thought that microwave oven is actually like that agent, what's her name? The one that you buy, the woman who, Alexis, yeah. I have an Alexis, I forgot the name. I thought that microwave is really Alexis listening in on everything you're doing in the kitchen and talking.
Yeah.
No, but it wasn't. It's not advertised as having a. It gets, yes, it responds to your voice. So I yell pizza, and it will be set to cook the pizza. I didn't know it's actually. All right. So as far as what's going to happen to marketing, we may become the most hated profession in the world if this happens.